Jared, you said something that I think is really interesting. You said Erdogan has a soft spot for the Palestinians. Can I just take that concept and can you explain the historical context of Arabs, the Arab world and their relationship with the Palestinians? Sort of, because it's definitely had its ebbs and flows over the arc of history. And so how do people think about it, as just broadly speaking, just in terms of like the big historical arcs that have kind of shaped this relationship between Arabs and Palestinians specifically?
Well, that's a question we could spend about 3 days talking about, but I'll try to give you kind of a very quick version of it. So I think that, a lot of this goes back really to, people say it goes back to a lot of times, but I think that we have to probably go back to, and I'll try to do this very quick, is really in 1948, which was a complicated time. It's post-Holocaust, post-World War II. Again, the Middle East really in the early 1900s was created by a lot of arbitrary lines drawn by foreigners. And you had a situation where Israel the UN puts forth the partition plan. Israel, they're willing to recognize Israel as a state for the Jewish people and also give a state to the Palestinians. The Arabs reject that and attack Israel. And there's a whole war. During that war, it was flared up really by General Nasser from Egypt, who at the time was the leader of the Muslim world. During that war, Israel was able to defy the odds and win, and a lot of Palestinians were either forced from their homes or displaced from their homes. There's versions where they say the Arabs said, "Leave your homes," and then, when the war's over, you're going to come back and take everything. Some Arabs stayed in their homes, and actually today they're Israeli citizens with full, equal rights as other Israelis. And so that happened. Then in 1967, that's when Egypt attacked again. And during that war, again, Israel miraculously won. And that was really kind of the time where Israel was able to expand their territory. They took over the West Bank at the time, which didn't belong to the Palestinians as much as it belonged to Jordan. It was part of Transjordan at the time. And then they also gained control of the Gaza Strip, which also was previously administered by Egypt, although when Egypt was administering it, they didn't take it as their territory. They never granted citizenship to the people who were there. So between 1948 and 1967, when the Six-Day War occurred, most of the leaders in the Arab world enjoyed leaving this issue out. It was a great way to stoke nationalism, and it was a very easy political issue for them to say, well, we need to do this and to fight for the Palestinian people. So in a lot of ways, it was a way to deflect from their shortcomings at home and to justify certain actions they were taking because they were fighting for this group of people. Then it gets really interesting after the Six-Day War. So this was the second time that the Arab countries had failed to destroy Israel, which is what they had promised they would do. So there's a young terrorist at the time named Yasser Arafat, and he was part of a party called Fatah. And what he said is, all these Arab leaders, they're lying to you, they're failing you. I'm going to be the one to start creating a liberation and opportunity for the Palestinian people. So he took on this mantle. Was able to use his Fatah group and some pretty thuggery ways to take over the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is a way that he got some international acclaim. And at the time, he was doing that from Jordan. So this is about 1968, 1969. They caused so much trouble in Jordan that King Hussein at the time, who's King Abdullah's father, who really was a very, very special diplomat and leader in the Middle East, got so fed up with Arafat. I mean, at the time he was causing trouble. It was steering people away. People wouldn't invest there. It was hurting tourism. And then they took it a little further and they tried to assassinate him, which was probably the final straw. So the Jordanian leader said, "Get these people the hell out of my country." It was a big clash between the PLO and Fatah terrorists, and then the Jordanian police and military, and they were able to expel them. And then the Palestinians went to Lebanon. That's where Yasser Arafat was. So they were there for about 12 years. Again, they went back to their old ways of fermenting radicalism and finding ways to cause trouble. When Israel invaded Lebanon in 1982, then Yasser Arafat fled again, this time to Tunisia. In Tunisia, they were living pretty well as a beachfront place. They're in these beautiful villas on the beach, and they kind of became a little bit disconnected from the Palestinian people. But there was a lot of resentment of the broader Arab world because they felt like, again, the Arab world didn't really, they would say they were for the Palestinian people, but never really stood up for them in the way that they felt like they deserved. So it took until about 1988 that finally, this is 40 years after 1948, the War of Independence, where the PLO was finally able to get the Arab League to say, and this is really because Jordan was just like done with this issue, to say, okay, we're going to acknowledge that this land here should become a Palestinian state. So the notion of a Palestinian state really didn't emerge till about 1987, 1988, which is the same time that Hamas actually, came about. And they came about really they were an offshoot of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. And their whole thing was basically, we're going to do full terrorism in order to prevent any compromise or any deals with Israel. So then you go to 1991, which is a very, very important time for the Palestinians, mostly because Saddam Hussein in Iraq invades Kuwait. And that was very scary for a lot of the Arab leaders, right? They didn't want, they did fear Saddam. He was seen as the radical. Arafat and the Palestinian leadership backed Saddam Hussein, mostly because they knew that he was seen as the revolutionary and popular with the more common man. And this pissed off every single Gulf leader, because they basically said, wait, this guy, if he's going to take over Kuwait, he could come for Saudi Arabia, he'd come for UAE. So they were all very against that. And at the time, there's about over 200,000 Palestinians in Kuwait. What happened at that time, though, was that made the Palestinian leadership so weak, because a lot of the Arab countries cut off the funding. It was just done with them. And that's really what led to the Oslo Accords. So the Oslo Accords happened not because Arafat necessarily, all of a sudden said, after 37 or 27 years of trying terror and pushing forward, he basically ran out of other options, and this was his only way to get some form of legitimacy. So they dropped from their charter the whole notion of destroying Israel and said, let's try to create this area where we can have governance and try this whole effort for a Palestinian state. So that's really kind of that's a long, short version of kind of how we got to then. And then in the last, I'd say 30 years, the big change that I would say between then and today is that you have a new Middle East forming. And a lot of the work we did in the Trump administration was really to help what I'd call the new Middle East emerge, where you have a lot of economic opportunities now happening in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. There's been a massive mind shift where, if you go kind of post-Arab Spring, a lot of these leaders are saying, how do we create opportunity for our people? When I got into my job in 2017, all the experts were saying to me, the big divide in the Middle East is between the Sunnis and the Shias. And when I got there, I said, no. The divide is between leaders who want to give opportunity and betterment of life to their people, and people who want to use religion or whatever issue they want to hold on to from the past in order to deflect from their shortcomings and justify bad leadership. So I think what's happened today is you have a lot of the Gulf countries really wanting to see this issue get resolved, which is different than you had in Camp David in 2000 when Bill Clinton was getting close to a deal with Yasser Arafat. I think the Saudis and others at the time didn't want this issue to go away, but now the issue is really no longer useful for the Arabs. The only people it's useful to, quite frankly, is Iran, and that's why they've been backing Hamas and Hezbollah and all these other factions in order to continue their project of instability. So the way I kind of view this period right now is that the Middle East today is way stronger than it's been in the past. And this is what I would say the last gasp of Iran and those who have, pushed for destabilization and kind of this whole, Islamist jihadist project at the expense of kind of a collaborative Middle East, which will create a lot of opportunity for the next generation to really thrive.